So I have found my favorite fantasy book so far of 2024, and I'm not even sure Winds and Truth by Brandon Sanderson or The Fury of the Gods by John Gwynne are going to be able to dethrone The Forgetting Moon by Brian Lee Durfee, book one of the Five Warrior Angels trilogy. So I absolutely adored this book. I had such a great time reading it. I did give it a 4-star rating, but to give it a little bit more context to that, I have this ranked as my 38th favorite book that I have read since 2019 out of 275 books, and I actually went ahead and distilled that down and compared it to the fantasy books that I have read, and I have this as my 10th favorite fantasy book that I have ever read. It is only behind the likes of The Gathering Storm, Words of Radiance, The Way of Kings, some real heavy hitters of the genre. It is above the likes of every Malazan book I have read, every Wars of Light and Shadow books that I have read by Janie Wirtz, most of the Wheel of Time books that I have read, which is not something I would have expected at all. This is absolutely one of the best fantasy books that I have ever read. And if you have not read this, I absolutely implore you to at least give it a shot and try it out, because I think it's the kind of book that's going to work for a lot of people, especially if you are a fan of grimdark. So this is absolutely one of the grimdark kind of fantasy books. So if that's not your kind of genre, your subgenre, this obviously won't be the kind of book that I think you will like. But if you like a Malazan, if you like a Game of Thrones, which I think this is a very easy book to compare to for a lot of reasons, you will absolutely, I find it so hard to believe that you won't like this book. So I try not to do too much research on a book because I like to give my own opinion after I've read it, but I did poke around a little bit about this, and I did see that, because I felt this way as well, I did see a lot of comparisons to a Game of Thrones, and I absolutely think those things are valid. Like I said, I had that feeling as I was reading it, and for some of the reasons, like I already mentioned, it's grimdark in nature. Another reason is you have multiple points of view that are pretty unique. You're not jumping from one person who's in the same group as the other two people that are, switching point of view from. You have drastically different people in drastically different settings, in drastically different positions of power and all influence and all those kinds of things. And so, that once again compares very favorably to Game of Thrones. There is a war going on, and obviously, war is a big part of A Song of Ice and Fire. Now, I don't want to sit here and just compare to that, but I just want to point out that if that is a series that you like, I really think you need to read this series, because I think it matches up pretty favorably to it. So I'll go ahead and put up the full Goodreads, like what is this story about, but I'll just read off what the basic little bit of this story is. A massive army on the brink of conquest looms large in a world where prophecies are lies, magic is believed in but never seen, and hope is where you least expect to find it. So I've talked a lot about that. I really like this book. Now let me go ahead and dive a little bit deeper in. We'll talk about the characters, we'll talk about the plot, and we're going to talk about world building, because I actually think we'll go ahead and let's just start with the world building. I think the world building in this book is some of my favorite I have ever experienced. This is such a unique world that is using, similar tropes and things that you would expect to see, but just doing it in a way that I don't think I've ever experienced in the same way. Durfee is able to take things that feel familiar and turn them on their head. I don't want to say what they are, because I feel like some of the reveals are very much something to be experienced when you're reading this book, but this world feels so alive, and part of that is because of the religions that are going on. The real premise of this story is there's going to be some kind of religious holy war happening between two different factions of people. They kind of both believe different things, and as somebody who really enjoys religious conflict and stuff in books, religion is something that I have studied in college and stuff at a very low level, nothing crazy, but it is always something that I'm very drawn to in books. And so, this might just be like the perfect recipe for me to really enjoy something, but that world building is just next level. And you're kind of almost getting two world buildings, right? Because you're getting two different stories that are about the same thing. And so the whole time you're not 100% sure which side is more right, which side is more wrong. I mean, there's a little bit of that gray mixed in. You can kind of end up picking your side by the end of this book, but I don't think there is anything wrong with that. The world is still full of mystery, but you're kind of given a little bit of information at a time. There are all kinds of magical elements that you're not 100% sure what's going on with them, like how magic is some of the magic. Is it more tricks and herbs and that kind of thing? But it is absolutely some of my favorite world building. So let's be a little bit negative, because I have been so positive so far. I will say, if you are a primarily character-focused reader, I do think the characters are maybe the weakest part of this book, but that they're still really well done. Once again, I'm nitpicking here. This is one of my favorite fantasy books I've ever read, but I feel like I need to just nitpick something, and I'm going to do that with the characters. Like, if I have to point to something, I think it is going to be some of the character work. I never was overly attached to a few of the characters. I still think they are all good. Like I said, they all kind of have their own storyline, which I was invested in every single one. So let's go ahead and just kind of mix plot in here as well. There was never a plot thread that I was not excited to go to. When I switched perspectives from one character to another, I was totally okay with that. We never stayed too long away from one character. Like, it never got to the point where it's been 250 pages and I really want to get back to this character and we haven't. That wasn't a problem. I think the pacing was done very well, switching between characters and everything. In general, I think most of the time characters made decisions that I found logical that would make sense for them to do. That's not entirely the case. There is one character in particular where I feel like a lot of their plot thread and character development was based on like plot conveniences, but not really, like I said, nitpicking. I feel like I understand every decision she made, but I'm not 100% sure it's the decision that she should have made, which I guess maybe is part of the reason for the story. But I mentioned earlier that you have a wide variety of characters that you're dealing with who are all dealing with different things. So you have the traditional farm boy kind of chosen one trope going on. You have a princess warrior kind of trope going on. You have kind of the helpless princess trope going on. You have the what I'm going to consider the opposing army compared to where we start the story at. You have point of view characters from that side. So you get that whole mix of everything going in. And I just really enjoyed all of those characters and all of those plots going on inside of it. I will say I have found, trying to make this video, that this is a book that I want to spoil a lot of stuff for, and I feel like that would be the best way to talk about it. So if I have not been able to convince you yet on why you should read this book, definitely leave me a comment down below and I will try to do it down there. Once again, one of my favorite fantasy books that I have ever read, and I cannot wait to get to book 2, The Blackest Heart. It's honestly taking everything in me to not just go ahead and start it right away, but I have some other reads that I have planned, so I will be getting to The Blackest Heart hopefully sooner than later. But that's all for me, and as always, have a good one.